Okay. All right. Good morning. My name is Amanda Borosh. I am a PhD candidate in special education at Purdue University, and I was invited to give a talk about applied behavior analysis and how it can be used for many different individuals, not just people with autism. So that's what we'll be talking about today. Just a little about me. I love to share the background of how I kind of got into special education. When I was an undergraduate student, I was a sophomore, and I got a part-time teaching assistant position at an inclusive preschool. And right here on the left, well, and on the right, is Maya. Her family is the one that started that preschool. She has Down syndrome, and actually became her nanny and spent lots and lots of time with her throughout her childhood. And she just really like touched my life and is kind of one of the main inspirations for why I got into special education. And this is a picture of her here with my husband and I at our wedding last summer. She's starting her senior year of high school now. She was, I think, like 2.5 in that first picture. So it's been really special to be able to keep up with her throughout the year. So my background is I have a bachelor's in early childhood education. This is general education, birth to 8 years old. And then I have a master's in early childhood special education from the University of Texas at Austin. I also have a graduate certificate in applied behavior analysis, or ABA. And as I said in the first slide, I am a PhD candidate now in special education at Purdue. I have about one more year, hopefully, before I finish. And my experience ranges. I started as a teaching assistant, like I said, in an inclusive preschool classroom. After I finished my master's, I did in-home early intervention. So going into families' homes and helping parents help their children with developmental delays meet developmental milestones. I also taught special education as a special ed teacher for several years, and then transitioned into a district-wide behavior specialist position in Chicago Public Schools. In this role, basically teachers of students with disabilities could call me and say, hey, I need help with challenging behavior. And my job there was to go into their classrooms and help them figure it out. And now I am a researcher in special education and also provide consultation to schools. And then I'm also a licensed special ed teacher and gen ed teacher and a board certified behavior analyst. I understood once I came to Indiana, I realized that a lot of people see BCBAs as autism specialists who work in clinics. But as you can see in my background, I actually have no experience in the clinic setting. I have only experience in homes and schools. So I try to take the science of human behavior and apply it to more natural contexts and settings, and with a diverse population of individuals. So the objectives today are to define applied behavior analysis, or ABA, identify who ABA is useful for, and describe at least 3 practical ABA strategies to use in the home and community. So if we were in person, I would be asking, how much do you know about ABA? You can kind of think about this yourself. Is it something that you've never heard of? Or maybe you're a highly trained practitioner and you're interested in how some of our strategies can be applied to individuals with Down syndrome. So just kind of put yourself on that scale and think about where you're starting from whenever we start this conversation. So what is applied behavior analysis? It is a science dedicated to understanding and improving human behavior. It is not a therapy. It is a science, and then it can be applied therapeutically. The focus is on how people's environments shape their behavior. So you and me and everybody in the whole world, our behaviors are primarily learned behaviors based on things that have happened around us. And it also includes the use of research-based strategies to support or change meaningful behavior. So the key word here being meaningful, we should be selecting behaviors that are useful and important in the lives of the individuals that we're supporting. And ABA can be used to learn new skills or to support individuals to decrease harmful or inappropriate or difficult behaviors. So I'm going to start out with a little myth busters about ABA. One of the myths is that ABA is an autism therapy. I kind of already said this a second ago, but the fact is that ABA can be applied therapeutically to support all humans in many different areas of behavioral needs. So ABA does not equal autism therapy. However, often it is applied therapeutically with autistic individuals or people with disabilities in general, but it does not mean that that's not what ABA is. It can be applied to support people's nutrition and exercise and sports coaching. Myself, I used ABA principles for myself to lose about 60 pounds. Um, I was on a panel once with individuals who did research, and they took some of the strategies actually we're going to be talking about today, prompting and chaining, and used it to teach Olympic weightlifting. It's been used to teach basketball skills. So the skills can be used for a variety of reasons. There's also a sub kind of section of ABA called organizational behavior management, which is the application of ABA principles in workplaces to support employee behavior. So to improve presenteeism, to make sure that jobs are getting done effectively or safely. So that's another application of ABA. And then it's often used in education and teaching. As a teacher, I was always using ABA principles to teach things like reading and math, teach social skills, those kinds of things. ABA is also used in addiction counseling and in gerontology settings. So working with individuals that are elderly that may have dementia or other problem behavior, ABA is also useful there. So these are just a few examples of how it can be applied outside of autism. Another myth is that ABA means that you're sitting at a table across from a child, giving Skittles to them when they answer a question correctly. That's what a lot of people picture when they think of ABA. But there are actually many approaches to implementing the science of ABA. Natural environment teaching is where you're using the individual's natural environment to set up learning opportunities and then using the ABA skills within those natural settings and those natural opportunities to teach. Visual supports stem from the science of ABA. Prompting strategies, you use prompting already, I'm sure, even if you don't know that's what you're doing. So today we're going to talk about how to use that systematically, but whenever you're using a prompt, you can consider that an ABA strategy. Environmental arrangement, so that means making your environment conducive to the behaviors that you want to see. So maybe in your home, you want your child to be able to be more helpful with some activity, so you make sure that it's like at their level so that they can reach it. That's an example of environmental arrangement, which does come from the science of ABA. And then any kind of reward system that you've tried to use. So if you've ever used a sticker chart or points or little tokens that your child gets, any kind of reward system would also probably be coming from ABA. I will say there's lots of ways that they can be implemented, and sometimes they're implemented in a way that's not helpful. But the idea of like token economies is what we call it, comes from ABA. So another myth is that ABA must only occur in clinical settings, but the truth is that the basic strategies of ABA can be learned and used by anyone in any setting. So you do not have to have access to a clinic in order for the individual you're supporting to benefit from ABA. Teachers and schools are often using principles of ABA. Caregivers and homes can learn to use principles of ABA. I actually just had a study published where we, over telehealth, provided training to parents of young children with neurodevelopmental disabilities and taught them how to use a challenging behavior intervention. And all of the parents were able to learn how to use that strategy with 100% accuracy. And they also they saw that their child's challenging behavior decreased and their communication increased. So it is totally possible for caregivers to use ABA strategies in their natural home setting. Support personnel in residential facilities. So if you have a loved one that lives in a residential facility, the direct support people there also could use ABA strategies. If you have somebody that's a transition age or an adult and they're receiving job coaching, oftentimes those job coaches are also using ABA strategies in that work or community setting. So the point being here that you don't actually have to have access to a clinic to receive some benefits of ABA. I will say there is a disclaimer here that with advanced strategies, it would need to be implemented and supervised by a board certified behavior analyst or an ABA trained clinical psychologist. But just basic strategies like we're going to be talking about today can be implemented by you in your natural setting. So what does all of this mean? It means that ABA is appropriate and useful for individuals with Down syndrome. The citations I have here down at the bottom are examples of studies that have been done using ABA strategies for individuals with Down syndrome. You don't have to have access, again, to clinical services to benefit from basic ABA strategies. And then also that this means that natural caregivers, so if you are a parent or a grandparent or a sibling or some other kind of caretaker who cares for an individual with a disability, you can learn to use basic strategies in your setting with that person so they can benefit from them. So some of the basic principles we're going to talk about. Basic principles of ABA, so these are like the kind of foundations, is that a person's environment influences their behavior. We are born with some behaviors that are natural or innate. So, you know, when a newborn comes out, they know how to eat generally, they know how to use the bathroom or make a messy diaper. So those are examples of behaviors that are not taught, but primarily most of the behaviors that we engage in throughout the day are behaviors that are learned, like our language, our communication, you know, chores that we're doing, those kinds of things. When I say behavior in this presentation, which you probably have already realized, I'm talking about any physical or audible action that a person does. So I'm not referring to problem behavior when I say behavior. I'm talking about anything that you can see or hear someone do. So keep that in mind as we go through this presentation. We know that things that happen before a behavior, so environmental events that happen before a behavior, may encourage or discourage a particular behavior. So let's say that I really want the individual that I'm working with to support me with folding and putting away laundry, okay? But maybe they are, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old, so they're a little bit shorter. If I want them to help me with folding and putting away laundry, I'm going to have to make sure that where they're putting away the laundry is somewhere that they can reach. If I have it where it has to be up on the top shelf, the towels, the likelihood of them engaging in the folding laundry and putting it away behavior is discouraged. So instead, we want to arrange the environment in that example to encourage the appropriate behavior by making sure that they're able to access those things. And then we also know that things that happen after a behavior might increase or decrease the future use of that behavior. So these are environmental events after you do something that change your future engagement in that behavior. So for example, if I am a little kid and I don't know better and I put my hand on a hot stove, the event that happens after that is that I get burned, and that now decreases the future chances that I'm going to put my hand on the stove, at least on purpose, right? So we can do the same thing to shape new behavior by reinforcing it. So after a behavior, we might give some kind of desired response, some, you know, sort of reward or reinforcer that might increase the future use of that behavior. So these are kind of the basic principles of ABA, that our behavior is learned and shaped through things that happen naturally before and after our behaviors. So we're going to be talking about today mostly how to use ABA strategies to teach new skills. So we'll talk about task analysis, prompting and fading, chaining, and reinforcement. Task analysis. This is where you break down a complex activity into small, doable steps. So something that has multiple steps, we're taking it and we're making it many little steps that are doable for the individual that we're supporting. These are really good for chores or daily living skills. So like doing the laundry has multiple steps, right? Like if it's clean already, I have to go over to the wash or dryer. I have to open the dryer. I have to pull the clothes out and put them in a hamper. I have to carry the hamper to wherever I'm going to be folding or hanging things. I have to fold and hang, then I have to put them away or sort them, right? Sometimes I'm washing like, bathroom towels with kitchen towels, so I have to know how to sort them. So there's a lot of small steps within chores and daily living activities, things like showering or getting ready in the morning, for example, or getting dressed. All of those have multiple steps. Academic activities. So when I was a teacher and, we're teaching long division or some other kind of multi-step process, we can use task analyses to break up those steps into tiny little doable parts. Community-based activities, so grocery shopping, for example, there are many, many steps if you break it down and think about it in completing a shopping trip, right? So when we're making task analyses, we want to make no assumptions. What I mean by that is we don't want to assume that the individual knows what to do in any step. If we write it down and they know what to do, that's great. That's just a step that we don't have to teach, but we don't want to assume that they don't, that they already know how to do it and not include it in the task analysis. One thing you can do is do the activity yourself and then watch someone else do it, and make sure that you're not missing any steps. So you're going to write down each small step and then practice using the task analysis once you've created it yourself. So you're going to take your task analysis and go and follow the steps exactly as they're written. Make sure you're not doing something that isn't written down to make sure that you've gotten every step. You might be familiar with the peanut butter and jelly example of this, but basically what this is if we were in person, I could say, okay, tell me how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And then you might say, okay, so you're going to put the peanut butter on the bread and then put the jelly on the bread and then put the 2 pieces of bread together. Well, what if I had all the supplies there, but I just took the container of the peanut butter and put it on the container of the bread and then the jelly on top of that? Because you didn't tell me that I needed to open the bread, get out a slice of bread, get a knife, open the peanut butter. So you can see how a task analysis can become really detailed and that we want to make no assumptions that the individual knows that they're supposed to, for example, open the bread and pull out 2 pieces of bread. So that's an example of like how detailed your task analysis should be. So here's an example that I found online. I do have the website for this there if you're interested in downloading it. It was a Teachers Pay Teachers. But this is washing the dishes. So you can see it says turn on warm water. This even has visual supports, which I highly recommend if the individual that you support does not read, or maybe it's not a strength at least. Pick up the sponge, wet the sponge, squeeze the soap onto the sponge. Pick up the dirty dish, wet the dish, scrub the dish with the sponge, rinse the soap off the dish, put the clean dish in the drying rack, and then turn off the water. So I think this is pretty detailed. Even like things like pick up the sponge, I thought that was really interesting. Like I wouldn't have necessarily thought that you needed to put that one on there. And it could be that the individual that you're supporting knows to pick up the sponge, and that's fine. That's just a step that you don't have to teach. Here's an example of showering. This also includes lots of steps, right? So turning on the water, standing in the shower, getting soap, wash your face, wash your arms, wash your body. This little image has a washcloth. So like maybe there could be another step in there that's like put the soap on the washcloth or rub the soap on the washcloth, right? Wash your legs, get shampoo, wash your hair, rinse, turn off, and dry off. So those are some examples of task analyses. Take this moment just to kind of think of what are some other skills that it might be beneficial for you to teach. Okay, so I'm going to just demonstrate this actually, but when we're at this end of the slides, there will be a QR code where you can fill out a form and I can send you this exact form if you're interested. But we're going to practice writing out a task analysis in a minute together. Before we do that, we're going to talk about prompting. So prompting is a strategy to use to encourage the correct use of a behavior. So if you're trying to teach a new skill, the correct behavior, let's say if it's, doing laundry, might be to go open the door to get the dry clothes out. A prompt is any kind of strategy that you use after the initial cue. So the initial cue might be that the buzzer goes off on the dryer, excuse me. And then any strategy you use to support the individual to go open the door is then considered a prompt. It's used before the expected behavior and should not only be used after an error. So let's say that the timer goes off and the individual you're supporting does not go to get the clothes. That would be considered kind of an error. They didn't respond to that timer. So what we want to do is try to prompt before they can not respond. In that case, maybe an error would be like if they waited 5 minutes before they went and got it when it was ready. The prompt would be something that you do to help them get to the dryer so that they can get the clothes out. We want to try to use prompts to prevent incorrect responses, and again, not only respond after they've messed up. Okay, so if you're teaching some other skill and they did it wrong and then you are correcting it, you kind of waited too long. The goal is to try to prevent the error in the first place. Sorry. Prompting should be used purposefully and systematically, which we're going to talk about, but there is actually a correct way to do prompting that is the way that is most effective in teaching new skills. And then prompts should be faded over time to promote independence. I imagine that you probably have observed working with somebody who's very dependent on prompts. They're constantly waiting for somebody to tell them what's next. They're not really taking initiative to do the things that need to be done. I worked with a student who was in 8th grade who had a one-on-one paraprofessional for his entire school career. And he was so reliant on other people doing things that if you were like going to walk through a set of doors and they were going to close on him, he wouldn't put his hands out because he was so used to somebody else being there. This is a symptom of the person who's teaching these individuals not fading their prompts. When I took my coursework for my ABA certification, the presenter talked about how a lot of times we talk about the individuals having prompt dependence as if it's their fault, but really it's the teacher's fault. When I say teacher, I mean it's the person who's supposed to be supporting them. It's their fault for not fading prompts fast enough. So we're going to talk a lot about fading. And there are many different types of prompts, and the order in which we use them matters so that we're making sure that we're, one, helping them respond correctly, but two, not doing everything for them. So here's the prompting order. When we're using prompts, you want to use the least support level, the thing that's like what I call least intrusive, that results in the correct behavior or response that you're looking for. Least to most is used for skills that the individual already has experience with, or at least has been exposed to. And then most to least would be used with brand new skills that they've never tried before, that you've never seen them demonstrate before. And that'll make sense in a second. So as we're going through this, you'll see that the least support type prompts are at the top. And then as we go down, they become more intrusive, if you will, or more support. They provide more support. So the first thing that we can possibly do is let them respond to a natural cue. So the example that I used a second ago, whenever the dryer timer goes off, that would be a natural cue for somebody to go get the clothes out of the dryer. And the thing that we can do in this moment is wait about 5 to 10 seconds if we're trying to teach this skill to see if the individual will do it themselves. If you ever sound like a broken record, or you're, as soon as there's some sort of natural cue, you're giving some sort of prompt, one thing you can do is just try to wait to see if the individual will do it themselves. And I will say 5 to 10 seconds can feel very awkwardly long. So really you want to count in your head before you give the prompt. to make sure that they actually have optimal time to demonstrate the skill independently. If they don't respond, or you see they're about to make an error, the next type of prompt that you can use is a visual. It could be a picture or a written. If they can read, it could be like a written prompt of some kind. I understand that you're not always going to have access to these things, so it's okay if you can't use visual prompts, but they are really helpful in a lot of scenarios. So if there's something that you're working on, a task analysis, it might be worth it to like just, Google some images to have available some visuals for prompting. Then the next one is gestural prompts. So let's say you're trying to teach them something, you waited, they didn't respond, you showed them a picture, they're not responding. The next intrusive prompt would be to point to, like, for example, go to the laundry room to get the dryer, the clothes on the dryer. And it might be that you have to get their attention too, right? So like if they didn't hear the timer, you might have to like kind of block whatever they're looking at and point to go to the dryer. The next one would be using a verbal prompt. There is some debate about how intrusive verbal prompting is. Some people would put that at the top and say it's not intrusive at all. Some people would put it at the bottom and say it's very intrusive. I put it in the middle because I think it can be either. Verbal prompting, this is where you are using your words to tell them what to do, okay? After a natural cue, if you're telling them what to do, that's a verbal prompt. Verbal prompts tend to be less effective, especially if you use that type of prompt all the time. And they're pretty hard to fade. So that's why I put it in here, because it should only be used if these other ones are not being used at that moment. And then let's say you tell them, go get the clothes out of the dryer. That didn't work. You might say, watch me. And then you go and demonstrate getting the clothes out of the dryer. You're going to model it. If that doesn't work, you might use partial physical, meaning that you might tap the individual on their shoulder or something to get them to stand up, to prompt them to stand up to walk towards the dryer. Or in some cases, which I think this is probably not appropriate for doing laundry, but I just want you to know that it's available, or it's a thing that can be used, is using full physical prompting, where basically you're fully supporting their body to go do what it is that they need to do. I like to use caution with this one. This is usually not necessary, especially if they will respond to any of these other ones. And also some people don't like to be touched. And so if that's going to evoke some sort of problem behavior, or you know that person doesn't want to be touched, I don't recommend using that one. But I do want to put it on there because it is an option if it's somebody that really needs full support to complete a new task. So we're going to talk about using now least to most. You can see this blue arrow is going down. So least to most prompting, you always want to start with that 5 to 10 second wait to give an opportunity for independence. You need to, in your task analysis, identify what is the natural cue for the task that you're teaching. Things like showering might be harder because, I mean, the natural cue for most of us would be like you start to feel dirty, or like, maybe it's a certain time of day, that kind of thing. Those are harder, but like if it's a chore that has like a timer or a set time that it's supposed to go off, make sure you identify what the natural cue is. If it's something that does need a verbal, that's fine. The first time you say that it's time to go do X thing, that's a direction. And then anything that happens after that is a prompt. So I just wanted to put that out there, that you're going to want to figure out what the natural cue is so that you can wait 5 to 10 seconds. And then if there's no response, you're going to move down the support levels, like we just talked about a second. If you try, or if you see that the individual is about to make an error, so they're about to do something, maybe you're teaching them how to fold and they're about to do it incorrectly, you might want to try to stop the error from happening and provide a prompt right then so that they do it correctly, so that you can praise it, and then hopefully they'll learn the next time the right way to do it. You don't want to wait until they've folded a whole towel, like, and it looks like a bundle or whatever, you want to try to prompt in the middle of doing that to try to prevent errors. And when you're using prompting, you want to use one type of prompt at a time. So if I am using gesture prompts, let's say I waited, it didn't work, maybe I don't have a visual, so now I'm using gestures. I'm not also using verbal in that moment. I'm pointing and waiting 5 to 10 seconds. And if that doesn't work, then maybe I move to verbal. But the point being here that these are specific prompts that are meant to be used independently and in that order. So don't use verbal every time you're doing one of these other ones either. And then in some cases, it's useful to go from most support to least support prompting. This is when you're doing this, again, these are for skills that maybe are brand new to the individual or they've never demonstrated before. So most to least is after a natural cue. So again, you've identified that. You're not going to wait 5 to 10 seconds. You're going to hear or see the natural cue and then immediately use whatever prompt level is going to be most likely to result in their correct use of that skill. So with the timer going off on the dryer, if they've never gone to get the clothes out of the dryer, you're going to wait for the timer and then immediately use whatever prompt. And maybe you're going to partial physical, kind of tap them on the shoulder to stand up, and then model walking to the dryer and getting the clothes out. If those are the prompts that are most likely to result in that individual to do what you need them to do. You do not have to start with full physical just because it's at the bottom. If something else that's less intrusive will result in the correct response, then you don't have to use it. And use one prompt at a time again. So fading, we talked about how to prompt, but I also had talked about earlier the importance of fading. This is so important for promoting independence. The purposeful removal. This is the purposeful removal or decrease of prompts. You're purposely going up that scale on most to least intrusive. The decision for when you fade is made based on prior performance of a behavior or skill. So it's how they demonstrated the skill last time and what type of prompt you had to use is how you make a decision for the next time that you're going to have them use that skill. And you want to fade soon after success with a current prompt level. So you don't want to use the modeling prompts for weeks, right? You want to fade it pretty soon after that works. Usually I say within 1 to 3 demonstrations. So like once the model prompt has worked and the individual has, gotten the clothes out of the dryer 1 to 3 times using that type of prompt, then you might want to fade to the next least intrusive prompt. So here's an example. You're going to choose a behavior to target, and we'll talk about how to choose which one in a minute. And then jot down the type of prompt used that resulted in their correct behavior. So like what type of prompt did you use that meant that they did the skill correctly? And after 1 to 3 demonstrations of that skill, fade to the next least support prompt. So here's that data sheet again. And again, at the end, there's a QR code and you can fill out a form and I'll send you an example. So I have this skill here, putting cereal bowl in the dishwasher. So I have my task analysis, which includes carrying the dirty bowl to the dishwasher, opening the dishwasher door, pulling out the top drawer, putting the bowl in the empty spot, pushing in the top drawer, and closing the dishwasher door. And then here I have dates going across, and then I have abbreviations for the different types of prompts, which you can see the key down here. So let's say on this day, obviously the natural cue in this case is that the individual finishes their cereal, right? So if I'm teaching this particular step, I'm going to be doing least to most, and it's going to be, I chose to use a verbal prompt, and that was appropriate and was able, the individual was able to carry their bowl to the dishwasher after I used a verbal prompt. So I'm just going to jot down that day I used a verbal prompt and that was effective. I did it again the next day, and I saw twice in a row that this individual with verbal prompts was able to carry the bowl to the dishwasher. So the next day, I'm actually going to fade to gesture prompts. So whenever I see that they're finished with their bowl, I might just point towards the kitchen. So that's an example of just how prompt fading might look and how you can track it. Okay, so once you have your task analysis, you've thought through what the natural cue is, the type of prompts that you're going to use, there is a way that we can teach these skills so that they're all linked together, and that's called chaining. Chaining is methods for linking skills together to complete a complex task. So we've kind of been talking about each skill in isolation, and we do teach them one at a time. However, this is used so that these skills are linked together. So there's 3 types of chaining. We're going to talk about forward chaining and backward chaining today, but there is also something called total task chaining, which is just where you're using prompts as needed throughout each step. But I think forward and backward are really useful because they're systematic. And it might be useful for you as the person who's teaching the skills to have a systematic way to teach them. So forward chaining, the focus is on teaching skills in the first to last order. So on your task analysis, it's first to last is how you're teaching it. Least support prompts are used for the current target skill. So if you're using forward chaining, it's that first target skill, you're using least to most. And then for the rest of the skills on that task analysis, you're going to use the most support prompts to help them with the rest of them. Because you're only targeting that first skill for teaching, and the rest of them, you're just kind of helping them do it and get it done. This is best for skills that the learner already knows how to start, but maybe has trouble finishing. So you might have an example of that in your home where you're the individual that you work with or that you have in your family. Maybe we'll get started, and then if you leave and come back, they did not finish what they were supposed to be doing. Forward chaining would be useful for that. So here are my examples. I did pull these images off of Google, just putting that out there. These are not mine. I'm also not making money from using these, but I just want to put that out there because they're not my images. So again, here's our first step is to carry the bowl to the dishwasher, open the dishwasher, pull out the top drawer, put the bowl in, push in the top drawer, and close the dishwasher door. So if you're using forward chaining, you're starting with this first one as the one that you're teaching. You're going to be using those least to most prompts until they are independent after the natural cue. So for here, again, the natural cue is finishing their bowl. Once you see a couple times in a row that after they finish their cereal, they carry their bowl to the dishwasher, you could consider that independent and then move on to teaching the next skill. When you're using forward chaining and you're focusing on this first skill, you're using the most support prompts to help them through the rest of these. So you're not trying to teach and wait and all those kinds of things for these. You're just using whatever prompt you know will help them do it correctly for the rest of these until this one's independent. Once that one's independent, you'll move on to using least to most to teach the second step and use most support prompts again to help them finish the task. And you keep doing this until they're independent on all skills. So here they should, after they're finished with their bowl, be walking to carry the bowl to the dishwasher and open the dishwasher door. They're independent with that. And now you're going to be teaching here, pulling out the top drawer. So you're going to be ready at the dishwasher, and maybe you use a model prompt or a partial physical prompt to help them pull it out. And then you use, well, you should wait, I guess I should say that. After the dishwasher door, you're waiting to see if they'll pull out the top drawer, right? And then you might use a visual prompt or a gesture prompt to point to the door, or a verbal prompt. So you're going down that hierarchy until they do it. And then you're using the most support prompts for the rest of this until they're completely independent across all skills. So backward chaining is probably what you think it is. It's the focus on teaching the skills in last to first order. So you're using the least support prompts provided for the current target skill. So again, that's the same. What you're choosing, which skill you're working on, except for this time, you're going to start by teaching the final skill. So you're using least support prompts for there. And then you're using most support prompts to support all of the skills in the task analysis that come before that last one. And this is best for skills that the learner already knows how to finish, but maybe has trouble starting. So I've definitely worked with lots of individuals who are, capable of doing something, but it's getting started that's the most difficult part. So starting with backward chaining means that you're going to already see independence towards the end of the chain, which is good. And this also might be useful for brand new complex skills that you're teaching for the first time. So again, here's our task analysis and visuals. If we're using backward chaining, you're providing the most support prompts for the first 5 skills in this case, and then you're focusing on teaching this one. So that means that when they're done with their bowl, you're going to use whatever prompt will take them to carry the bowl to the dishwasher. And you're going to help them open the dishwasher. You're going to do whatever you need to do to make sure that they pull out the top drawer and put the bowl in and push in the top drawer. After that, though, we're using least to most. So you're going to wait 5 to 10 seconds to see if they can close the door. If they don't close the door, then you're going to use a visual prompt, and then you might use a gesture prompt or a verbal prompt and so on until they close the dishwasher door. Once you see that they're able to close the dishwasher door within 5 to 10 seconds after pushing in this top drawer, you're going to consider that step as independent. And you're going to provide the most support prompts for these first 4 and now focus on using least to most for this one. And then after this one, they should independently close the dishwasher door because they've already been doing that. So you do that again until all skills are independent. So putting it together, you want to choose what type of chaining you want to use. If you're going to use forward or backward, you can use total task 2, where you're just providing prompts throughout. Again, I think that choosing a systematic way is useful. You're going to track the levels, the prompt levels for each skill. And remember that once you are targeting a skill, always start with a 5 to 10 second wait time. So when it's the one that you're working on, you're always going to start with that least intrusive prompt, which is just waiting. And you're always going to only use one type of prompt at a time for each skill. I also want to say that these should be used when I'm talking about tracking this. I don't expect like a mom of multiple children or a dad of multiple children who's working and trying to get out of the house to like be using that moment to be when you do this. You can choose, maybe it's 2 times a week is when you're choosing to actually teach these skills, and the rest of the times you're actually just having to do what you usually do because that's life. So I don't want this to come across as unrealistic. I think that you can still keep in mind what types of prompts you're using, even if you're not able to do it every time. That's fine. We want something is better than nothing. And using some sort of, systematic prompt and fading will be useful for your individual to become more independent. So I just want to throw that out there, that if this looks like totally unrealistic, you don't have to do it every day. You don't have to do it every time. But maybe you choose a day or 2 a week where you're like, okay, no, this is the day that we're going to like actually be teaching them to do this. So I've just put that out there. So here again is our data sheet for the carrying the bowl to the dishwasher. So again, here we were using verbal prompts and then gesture prompts and a visual prompt. And then I saw that the child I'm supporting was able to be independent. Here, you can see as I'm targeting and fading the prompts for this one, I'm using partial physical prompts for everything else for the entire time to help them get it done. On the day that I'm moving to independent and I see that this individual is able to independently carry their bowl to the dishwasher is when I'm starting to fade and teach this next skill of opening the dishwasher door. So you can kind of see that over time, once I modeled that and they did it correctly, and I use a verbal prompt and they did it correctly, then I use a gesture and they did it correctly, then they're independent. I'm now going to start focusing on fading the third one. But when it's not time for that skill to be taught, I'm still using this like partial physical because I know that that's going to be what they are going to be successful with for the rest of the skills. So you're only teaching one at a time. So think through that skill that you thought that you might want to teach somebody, and what type of chaining would you use and why? So again, is this something that they have no trouble starting, but they have problems finishing, or maybe they are okay with starting, but then you walk away and they never finished? You would choose your type of chaining based on that. So the last section we're going to talk about is reinforcement. Reinforcement is an event that happens after a behavior or a skill that maintains or increases the future use of that behavior. Reinforcement should be individualized, meaning everybody has preferences. So you want to make sure that the thing that you're delivering, or the event that's happening after the skill that you're trying to teach, is individualized and important and meaningful to that person. So I've worked with lots of people who are like, sticker charts don't work. I'm like, well, a sticker then isn't a reinforcer for that individual. They don't care about a sticker, so we're not going to use it. We're going to use something that's individualized to that person. And reinforcement happens naturally. For example, I feel relief when I'm finished doing something that I needed to get done, right? That is a natural reinforcer for cleaning up, for example, if I feel like it's messy in my house. And then sometimes I do something and I get praise or good attention from others. That is a natural thing that happens to most of us. Maybe I get access to a desired item or an activity or a location. A lot of us go to work and we get money, right? And then we get access. We can then use that money to pay for our housing and our food and those kinds of things. So our work behavior is reinforced by access to money. That's just one example of like a natural way that our behaviors are reinforced. But we can also use planned reinforcement, which is when you're using a pre-established systems that maybe are not completely related to the behavior. And I'll expand on that in a second. These are less natural, but still helpful. So these are things like maybe using a sticker chart. And don't use this if your individual doesn't care about it, but I'm just using it as an example here. It's not necessarily natural to receive like a sticker to work towards, watching your favorite movie for doing dishes. The natural reinforcer there is that you have access to clean dishes. But sometimes we have to use a planned or pre-established, less natural reinforcement system in order to help build a skill. It's important that we're using reinforcement to maintain or increase new skills. So when we're seeing this individual walk to the dryer after the buzzer goes off and pull the clothes out, we want to be providing reinforcement for that. Again, you might have to start with planned reinforcement. So some sort of token system. These are rewards that are kind of unrelated to skills or tasks. You and I don't get tokens or stickers or really probably praise whenever we go get our clothes out of the dryer, but the individuals that we're supporting might benefit from that at first. And then we want to slowly fade to more natural reinforcement. So over time, once they've picked up that skill, you might be able to say like, oh, wow, like you have a clean shirt you can wear right now because you got your laundry out. Again, those are things like relief, praise, or access to things. There's my example. So like if you learned how to complete your laundry, then your favorite shirt is clean and ready to wear when you're ready for it. That's an example of a natural reinforcer. You might have to start by using that planned or arbitrary reward. Arbitrary meaning, again, that thing that's not really related to the actual task. So maybe if you're working on showering, if you shower independently, you get to watch your favorite TV show. But when you're doing this, you want to incorporate natural reinforcers as much as possible. So maybe after they shower independently, you want to provide praise. And then point out to them that they get to leave for their preferred location right away because they finished showering. And then you want to fade out that arbitrary reward so that it becomes just more natural. I talked about how reinforcers should be individualized. So to find possible reinforcers, you might want to assess somebody's preference. There are lots of available preference assessments out there. There's interviews that you could either fill out yourself about the individual that you're supporting, or there's also interviews to be given to the individual that I can ask them, like, tell me about your favorite person at work or whatever the setting is that you're working on. There's surveys, and then you can also use direct observation where you're actually just watching the individual. You could, give them free access to the house if it's safe, and just watch and see what they go towards. That might give you an idea of what they're looking for. If you try using a reward or reinforcer, but the behavior does not maintain or increase, then it's not a reinforcer. So if you think that watching, I don't know, Peppa Pig is a reinforcer, but it doesn't increase whatever skill you were trying to teach, so if you have them watch Peppa Pig after they, help with the dishes or whatever, and it doesn't increase or change how they're helping with the dishes, then it's not an effective reinforcer and you have to find something else. This is an example. You can actually Google this one. Reinforcer assessment for individuals with severe disability. You can print this out, and if you are the caretaker, you can fill it out yourself, or if you are a teacher or a service provider, you could interview a caretaker to get more information about things that might be reinforcing to that individual. You can also just Google preference assessments, and you're gonna see a lot of different things come up. So that's something that you can use if you feel like you're having a hard time identifying an effective reinforcer or reward. I'm using those terms interchangeably. So our conclusion is that ABA is a science that can be used to help any human behavior, not just people with autism. And that basic ABA strategies can be used by caregivers and natural environments. So everything we talked about today are things that can be used by you in whatever environment you're supporting individuals with disabilities or without, honestly. You might have been thinking through this like, man, I should use this with, should use this with my kid that's in college now. Yes, ABA can be applied to everybody, not just people with disabilities. Break large tasks into small doable steps using a task analysis. Use purposeful prompting to teach new skills. And then teach those complex skills systematically using chaining, forward or backward or total task. And make sure that you're reinforcing these new skills and behaviors so that they're able to be maintained or increased in the future. Here are my references. And I want to thank you for listening. If you want to fill out this form, I will check it occasionally and send anybody who completes the form access to a resource folder where I included a copy of these slides. I have a copy of that data sheet and a copy of the visual for the prompting. So if you are interested, you're welcome to fill out that form and I will try to send it to you. If you don't hear from me, you're also welcome to email me at amandaborosh@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you found it helpful.